And I think from judging by this crowd, he's got a bit of a fan following, so not surprised there. It's going to be a great morning for sure. As always, we will kick off coffee talks with the Indigenous land acknowledgement, and then we have a really quick special guest that I'll introduce right after. Georgian College acknowledges that all campuses are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. Georgian College is dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. Thank you, Miigwech. So I'm really excited this morning. I get to hand it over to a really good friend of ours, Sven Hansen, and he's going to talk quickly about some really exciting upcoming things that are happening that we all can get access to. So Sven, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I'm Sven Hansen, and I'm an entrepreneur, just like a lot of you. And over the last couple months, I've launched a podcast called Hometown Brawn, and it's well, it started out as an opportunity for me just to vent, really about everything that's happening. But I wanted to use it as an opportunity to collaborate with others. I think that collaboration is a key to help drive innovation. And I think that during these times, with us being in isolation, I think entrepreneurs, first of all, are not we're not scared of isolation, but I think this is a whole new level. So it's a great opportunity for me to collaborate with others. And I wanted to bring this to a bigger platform. So what I'm doing on Wednesday is I'm launching an event called the Entrepreneurs Roundtable. And, one of the things that I liked so much about our little ecosystem was that there's an opportunity for us to network quite a bit. And with, obviously, this isolation period, we cannot do that. So this is an opportunity for us to get together digitally and just talk. So it's really an opportunity for us to talk about what's happening. I know there's no real manual for what's happening right now. And a lot of us are pivoting, as it seems, by the day. So this is an opportunity for us to get together, talk about what we're doing, and hopefully some really cool innovation comes out of it. Maybe some things that we can introduce into our business. So that's on Wednesday. It's called the Entrepreneurs Roundtable. It's Wednesday at 3 p.m. So if you head to hometownbrawn.com and just click on Roundtable or hometownbrawn.com/roundtable, then you can sign up and you'll be sent an email with the Zoom details. So that's on Wednesday. On the 13th of June, we have an event that is, sort of a brainchild of Chris Adams, who I don't believe is on this call, just because he has a previous engagement. But Chris wanted me to pass on some details as well about this event. And there's a trail that goes from downtown Barrie, the Heritage Park, all the way to Fort Willow. And it's a 15-kilometer trail, or a 9-mile portage, they call it. And it's got a lot of historic significance to our area, dating back to the War of 1812. So what we're going to do is socially distanced. We're going to get together, and on the 13th, we're going to walk it, and we're going to talk, and we're going to take some moments of gratitude along the way, take in nature. And I think it's just an opportunity for everybody to get out of their house, get out of their little bubble, still be safe, and talk, and maybe get a glimpse of the old normal. So that's happening on the 13th, and I implore everybody to sign up for that. It's going to be great, and that is on Saturday, June 13th. We are leaving Heritage Park at 9 a.m. and it's an approximately a 4-hour hike. So also really good for self-care, to get some exercise, get out of these chairs. and that'll be happening on the 13th. So make sure you sign up so that you can go to hometownbrawn.com/9 mile portage, or you can sign up on just go to hometownbrawn.com and just click 9 mile portage. That's it for me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Sven. I'm going to be joining you on all those things, and I can't wait to see the rest of you on those as well. And Jenna, I'll throw over your way for some housekeeping and then introduce our special guest.
Okay, thank you. So welcome everyone. It's good to see familiar faces back. For Paul, as he's talking, if you guys come up with some questions, we'd love for you to put them in the chat, and then Sarah and I will read them out after he's done speaking. So feel free to populate the chat with your questions and we'll address them afterwards. I'm excited to hear Paul speak, so we'll just get started, but I really need to introduce him because he's a super cool guy. If you guys have not met Paul before, he wanted me to do a little disclaimer about all his cool stuff in his background with his keyboards and guitars. So Paul is a member of a band. You guys might have seen him around the Barrie area. So if you ever need to hear a good tune, you should call Paul, and probably Jamie too. So Paul is the owner of Larche Communications. He's worked in the media and marketing business for over 40 years. He was the general manager of Telemedia Network Radio, and Paul oversaw the marketing and the radio broadcast efforts of the Toronto Blues, the Toronto Maple Leafs. He purchased a few radio stations that you guys might recognize, Kicks being one of them, and he won many awards in the industry, and and over the next 15 years, including the Canadian Country Music Association Station of the Year 8 times. In 2002, Paul launched Kicks 96.5 in Kitchener and Waterloo, and in 2008, he purchased a radio station in Aurelia. The station was rebranded as The Dock, and in 2009, Paul launched Kicks in Sudbury, and 2010 launched The Dock in Owen Sound. The company grew from 5 employees to over 80. The stations have been recognized as industry leaders and have raised over $3.5 million for their communities, and most notably with the Radio 4 campaigns. In 2018, Larche sold the radio assets to Bell Media, who continue to maintain the brands today. Alongside his daughter Jessica, Paul launched Larche Digital Media in 2012 to offer digital marketing services to clients in Simcoe County, Sudbury, and Owen Sound. Larche Communications has been recognized in the industry and community leaders in Simcoe County and beyond. In 2018, Larche purchased the CME and hosting division of Tiger Shark. Paul is on the board of the RBH Foundation and is the vice chair of Georgian College Board of Governors. And with that being said, I will pass it over to Paul so we can get started.
Thank you. I got to cut that bio down because it eats into my talking time. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm just going to get right into it because I want to, first of all, I want to thank Sarah and Jenna and all the HBEC folks for inviting me to talk here. I've been hearing about these coffee talks, and so I'm very honored to be on one of them. I see a lot of familiar faces, and I've done a lot of talking for HBEC events in the past, so hopefully this won't be too much of a repeat to you. I always try to bring something a little new. We're going to be talking today about archetypes, and archetypes are something that we have used even going back to our radio days, but we still use it a lot today. We do a lot of work with companies on their branding, and figuring out what your correct archetype is can be a really beneficial thing to do when it comes to branding, but probably more important today than ever in this COVID world that we live in, because it really gets to talking from an authentic voice. And right now people, they want to hear from authenticity. So hopefully you'll pick up a couple of things here. And at the end, if we have time, I'll have a little bonus for you. So with that being said, I'm going to try sharing my screen. And if everything works well, we should be in business. So, all right. Can everyone see that? I'm going to assume okay. So archetypes, just before I even get into it, I'm going to, the first disclaimer is I certainly didn't invent this. Archetypes or some forms of it have been around for many years, particularly in psychology. A lot of it goes back to Carl Jung, who anybody who has studied psychology in post-secondary school would know about. And there's lots of stuff on the internet about archetypes. We've taken it and we put our own twist on it to tie it into branding. There's a few good books that are on it as well. And I think as I go through it, it'll make a little sense. But again, you can go to, Jungian archetypes. If you can see my screen, there's all kinds of information on what it's all about. But really, in a nutshell, what they are is they're universal symbols and images that we all are born with from our collective unconscious. And I know that sounds really heavy, so I'm not going to get into explaining the whys of it, but I can tell you for sure that it is something that works. So with that, I'm going to start the presentation. And any of you who've heard me talk about branding in the past know that we always say, when we ask for the definition of a brand, is your brand is really what people think you are, and who are you. So it's really important to make sure that you're speaking from a consistent voice when it comes to branding. So archetypes, they're grounded in psychology. They're universally familiar character types that transcend time and place and culture and gender and age. And they're hardwired into our psyche. So we know them intuitively, regardless of the language, the culture. It's just something that makes sense to us. So if you choose an archetype that best represents your company or your organization and their values and the expectations of your target customer, your brand will be much more authentic, and it's going to connect at a much deeper level. So think of archetypes as your brand's personality. If it was a person, it should be predictable and it should be consistent with what your customers' expectations are. And also, understanding what your archetype is really helps you avoid brand multiple personality disorder, we call it, which is a common branding mistake, which means that you're talking from one type of personality one day in your marketing materials, and then the next day it's coming from a different direction. And most people consciously don't pick it up, but unconsciously they know that, hey, listen, this person seems a little, insincere, because they're talking in different types of voices. So archetypes, again, they affect customer motivation by providing an intangible experience of meaning with integrity. And doing this and doing it consistently over time really will compel brand loyalty. So apply the power of archetypes to creatively and intuitively resolve branding inconsistencies, and use it as a beacon to direct your branding and marketing efforts internally and externally. So what are archetypes? What are they? Well, most successful brands have one predominant archetype, and some have a complementary or secondary archetype. And these archetypes, over time, they can move because it's based on where your company's brand and evolution is. If you start out as a small startup brand, and then over 10 years you become very successful, your archetype could change a little through that, because the voice of a startup isn't necessarily the same voice as someone. It just has to come from a place that makes sense, that it would be logical to go there. But most archetypes should remain the same. There's 12 of them, and they fall into 4 groups. And what I'm going to be doing today is going over those 12. They're really based on what your target customers' needs and their pain points or their fears. So keep that in mind as I go through this. And I've just put up the archetype wheel, we call it, on your screen. And you can see that there's 12 of them there. You'll also just tell by the names: caregiver, ruler, jester, regular guy, gal, lover, outlaw, hero, magician, innocent, sage, explorer, and creator. Those all they should all sound familiar to you. You should know, somebody that fits into one of those categories. And they're divided into 4 areas. And like I said, I'm going to go through each one of them, give you a little background on them. Now, when picking your archetype, there's no one that is better or worse than the other. It's what one does really represent who you are and what you do. So there's no, you don't want to be an archetype that you're not. You want to be who you are, and you should be somewhere within these 12 archetypes. So the first three are called stability and control archetypes. And in there's the creator, the caregiver, and the ruler archetype. So what are motivations for customers that, sorry, I hope everyone can hear me all right. So what are motivations for people that would pick these archetypes? Well, these type of archetypes, how do they help people? They make them feel safe and in control. They give them some sense of structure. And what are their pain points for this kind of group? Why would people gravitate toward these types of archetypes? Well, they're afraid of either ill health or chaos or ruin or decline, anything that feels like they don't have control. So these types of archetypes bring a sense of stability and control, hence the name for it. Okay, so the first one is creator. And a creator brand, they help people tap into their potential to bask in their creations and dreams. They're defined by imagination, curiosity, limitless vision, artistry, and passion. And they are inventors and they're groundbreakers. Their motto is, if you can imagine it, it can be done. And often these archetypes have different types of names in them. So you might hear them, they might be referred to as an artist or inventor, innovator, musician or writer or dreamer. These are creator archetypes. And I'll go through some brands that are creator archetypes, and they might even be a little counterintuitive, but the first one, and this company adopted this early, is Home Depot. And you might go, why would Home Depot, be a creator archetype? But they have done everything in their marketing and their voicing to help people create things. It could be creating a deck. It could be repainting a kitchen. It could be redoing your house. Everything that they try to position themselves as is that we want to help you create something. And again, you would think, okay, that's kind of odd, but when you think of it, it makes perfect sense. You go into Home Depot, or when we could go into Home Depot, they'd have seminars on how to build a deck or how to redo your kitchen and so on and so forth. They're always trying to help you create something. I'm going to refer to Apple a few times here because Apple is one of those companies that did go through significant transformation over the last 40, 50 years since they've been around. And depending on where they were in their evolution, certain archetypes made sense. And back in the late 90s, when they were actually on the verge of bankruptcy and they started working at coming back around, they really went after the creator archetype and went with the Think Different campaign. And you can see that even in this picture here, that it was all musicians and actors and creators, and they really took that. If you're like us, if you want to get into our brand. And back then their market share was very, very small, but that became very attractive and still remains so to this day. And there's all kinds of other brands that are creator archetypes. So you just, let your imagination take it over. Caregivers, they're considered in the role of protecting and comfort and nurture and support. They're generous, selfless, compassionate, dutiful, responsible, and committed, and they anticipate problems and they remedy them. Caregivers' motto is to love your neighbors as yourself. And they're also known as, they could be a saint or an altruist or the parent, the helper, the supporter, the humanitarian, motherly, fatherly, however you want to position it. Some caregiver brands are things like Campbell Soup, which is anything that has to do with just being, comfort food, and that is very attractive for caregiver brands. Another one you wouldn't think of, but Michelin, because Michelin did everything around, when you're driving on Michelin tires, it's safety that they were promoting. So they were actually positioning themselves as, we'll look after you, even though they're selling tires. Then there's the obvious one, like, anything that has to do with healthcare would fall into a caregiver brand. The ruler brand, again, it's pretty intuitive. They're authoritative, confident, high achieving, influential and charismatic leaders. They take comfort in establishing and maintaining control and structure and protocols and order, and they inspire respect and success. Their motto is power isn't everything, it's the only thing. And often they could be referred to as the boss or the leader, the king, the queen, the politician, the role model, anything that comes from a position of authority. And there's many ruler brands out there. For example, in the car business, arguably Mercedes would be up there as the one that's considered like a benchmark. For credit cards, it would be American Express. And some have even taken it to the point where they actually, they position themselves as a ruler brand, like Budweiser is the king of beers. And my favorite, Crown Royal, I mean, come on, it's called Crown Royal. So great ruler brand. The next three archetypes fall into what's called belonging and enjoyment. These are kind of little happy-go-lucky. And there's three of them in there: Jester, Regular Guy, Gal, and Lover. And again, remember, there's no archetype that's better or worse than any other. It's just, you just want to make sure whatever you pick, you talk from that point of view. So belonging and enjoyment motivations for people in this cluster are that they just want to feel love. They want to feel community, and they will gravitate towards brands that make them feel comfortable when it comes to that. Their concerns or their pain points is they don't want to be alone. They don't want to be exiled or orphaned or abandoned. They want to feel like they're part of a group. So first one is Jester. And Jester brands is really, it's to live in the moment. They are typically, fun, silly, lighthearted, spontaneous, and mischievous. They advocate not taking anything too seriously. They poke fun and draw attention at the joys of life. Their motto is you only live once, and sometimes they're also called, the jokers, practical jokers, the funny people, comedians, whatever. We've done work with companies, and we come back and we say, you know what, you should consider being a Jester brand. And they don't want to be because they don't think it's serious. But if you happen to be somebody who is, funny and that is your personality, then you shouldn't fight it. Because people will believe it to be sincere. And many brands have again used the Jester position to really, get their point across. It goes back to, one of the most famous campaigns of all time, Got Milk, where they would just, again, they were doing things in jest, but it got people's attention with the white mustache. M&M's is another great Jester brand that to this day, they still advocate that. Pepsi going up against Coke went with the Jester position for many years. So a lot of them out there, it was a very truthful voice. Regular guy, gal, this is a common one, but it's important. And regular guy, gals are just people who want to be part of the mainstream. They're motivated by the need to be part of teams, and they want to be neighborly and approachable and empathetic and practical. They're just regular people. They believe that everyone's created equal and everyone should get a fair shake. Sometimes they're referred to as the good old boy, the everyman, the every girl, the person next door, the solid citizen, the good neighbor, silent majority. All of those things are kind of the regular guy, gal. Some brands that represent them are IKEA. IKEA is also, their secondary thing is creator brand, because you build things with it, but they try to be furniture for everyone. People Magazine, for example, Wendy's in the fast food business. They still, use Dave when you walk in there, even though he's been, passed away many years ago. But he was just a regular guy. And probably the biggest brand, or two of the biggest brands that fall into this would be Walmart. And Walmart, again, is for the mainstream. And another big one would be Tim Hortons. Tim Hortons is a regular guy, gal brand. The Lover brand. Lover brands, they exude intimacy and sensual pleasure. They're passionate and have a seductive sensory appeal. They tend to be beautifully designed and satisfy fantasy and appear in times of need and belonging. And their motto is "You're the only one." They could be considered, you know, the partner, the friend, the intimate enthusiast, so on. A lot of these brands will use sex appeal in what they do, and like Haagen-Dazs, you see it a lot in anything that has to do with undergarment and clothes and cosmetics. Those so we're halfway through. Everybody good? I'm hoping. Thumbs up. All right, good. Okay. Okay, the other three at the bottom of the wheel are what we call risk and mastery brands. And within here is the magician, the hero, and the outlaw. And what motivates people to gravitate towards these types of archetypes is that they want to achieve. They feel that I want to be somebody. I want to make something happen. And their fear, their pain is that they're ineffectual or they're powerless. So they're looking for something that's going to give them that power. So within the three, the first one is the outlaw, and the outlaw brand are rebellious brands, discontent with the status quo. They actively confront, disrupt, and even overthrow the norm to fix it. They view rebellion as a productive and progressive way of getting their message across. Their motto is "Rules are made to be broken," and sometimes they're referred to as the rebel or the revolutionary, the wild people, the misfits, iconoclasts. And again, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that you feel that you're the underdog, is what the outlaw is. And many people are gravitated towards that. They want to be part of that underdog feeling. And I mean, there's some obvious outlaw brands. The one that's always in the poster child for outlaw brands is Harley Davidson, which means that, you know, you could be a 50-year-old accountant and, you know, wear leathers and drive through a town, you know, being a badass, you know. That's an outlaw brand, but many people are attracted to that. I talked about Apple a few times, and I said that depending on where they were in their evolution. Well, when we talked about the Creator brand, that was at the late 90s, early 2000s. When you go back to where they were in the early 80s, they were the underdog up against IBM, and they were trying to, you know, show that they were the rebel. And one of the most famous, most of you people probably weren't even born then, but one of the most famous TV commercials was during a Super Bowl game. It was 2.5 minutes long, and it was the introduction of the Macintosh computer, which is still around today. And but the whole premise behind it, you can find it on YouTube, was that they were the outlaw brand up against the big institution. And some of you have probably read the book 1984. And then you got Virgin. Again, they've always, you know, Sir Richard has always tried to, you know, be on the cutting edge and do kind of weird tactics to get their message across. There's many others out there as well. The hero brand are fearless, idealistic, purposeful, focused, tenacious. They're like superheroes. They feel compelled to right wrongs, to be fair, to make a difference, to be all that you can be. Their motto is, where there's a will, there's a way. And sometimes they're referred to as the warrior, the crusader, the superhero, the soldier, the dragon slayer, the winner, the champion, however you want to position it. And I'm sure you can start thinking of some brands that fit that. But again, the poster child for this one is Nike, and it's "Find Your Greatness," and is one of their slogans. But just do it, and everything else that Nike has done, their master marketers, you know, and to this day they're still doing it, and they're taking advantage of. They're not taking advantage. They're very smart marketers, but when things are going on, they're very quick to jump on and position themselves or the athletes that they promote as heroes. You know, Red Bull is another very successful brand that you know, ties into you take Red Bull and you can do anything. You know, there's many others out there as well, but anything that helps people want to succeed and be the best that they can do. A lot of military, anything that has to do with the armed forces would fall under that as well. The magician brand. Magician brands, they have the power to transform. They're innovators. They're catalysts for change. They make dreams come true. They just really, they're imaginative and very open-minded. They just make things happen. And they're also sometimes called visionary catalysts, medicine man, different ways of putting it. But again, a lot of great brands fall into that. Again, I'm going to talk about Apple one more time, and because again, it only made sense for them to do this. But in the late 2000s, when Steve Jobs was still alive, or to early to late 2000s, they transformed into, they weren't the rebel anymore. They were, they were coming out with very innovative stuff, and it was magic. And if you ever watched Steve Jobs do one of his talks, it was magic. He would pull out, when the first, iPad, or not iPad came out, but the first Walkman, or I can't even remember what it's called now, but the first music player they had, it was 1,000 songs in your pocket, and people couldn't get their heads around that. It was like magic. And of course, when the iPhone came out, or when he would take out a laptop out of a manila envelope, these were all considered like magical things. People were in awe. And, some would argue they're not doing that as much anymore, but certainly during that run, they were a magician brand. This one too, the Axe Effect, you could say they're a Jester brand and a magician brand, but the idea is that they make magic happen. You put this on and you turn into a different person. And then there's the obvious ones, anything that has to do with theme parks and children and magic would tie into these brands. And then the final three are what we call independence and fulfillment type archetypes. And within here, you have the explorer, the sage, and the innocent. Their motivations for this category is people that are looking to find, they're looking to find happiness. They want to be in a good, happy place. And these types of archetypes can help them do that. Fears here is that they're restless, or there's some emptiness, or they feel trapped. And working within these archetypes are a way for them to make sure that they don't fall into that. So innocent, again, big catchword here, but innocent, what it really means is to promote happiness, harmony, fulfillment, again, life's simple pleasures. These are very optimistic brands. They're pure, they're wholesome. They embrace lightheartedness and express childlike wonder in faith and possibilities. And their motto is, you're free to be you and me. Just be who you are. Sometimes they're referred to as utopian or mystic, sometimes even naive, dreamers. Innocent brands are, again, there's a lot of them out there, and the ones that do it very well. Dove, for example, switched over to just being yourself back about 10, 12 years ago. And it worked out extremely well for them. But probably the biggest brand that if you follow any of the Coca-Cola marketing manuals and that, they say that we promote happiness. That's what they do. And no matter how they're doing it, it's just like you open up a bottle and you open happiness, and that is an innocent brand. McDonald's also falls into this, and it's no mistaking that they say, I'm loving it, and they're just innocent. It's a happy place. And again, you can argue with some of this stuff, but that's the archetype that they have very successfully carved out for themselves. Sages are experts. That's pretty much what they are. They're mentors, teachers. They're intelligent. They're analytical. They're wise. They seek the truth. Their motto is, the truth will set you free. And again, they could be called the scholar, the thinker, the academic, the researcher. And again, this makes perfect sense for certain brands, because you want to go to an expert. But one of them would be like Oprah, for example. She's a brand unto herself, and people gravitate towards her for advice. And a lot of what she says, people will follow. Google is a sage brand. Like, if you want to get an answer to anything, you go to Google. But anything that has to do with financial institutions or accounting or banking would also fall under Sage brands. You want to go with somebody who really knows what they're doing. You don't want to, you don't necessarily want to go with, a lover brand if you want to invest your money. Like, and this is again where consistencies and inconsistencies come into play. And the final one is Explorer. So Explorer brands are ones that thrive for freedom and independence, to find themselves in the world. They're looking for discovery. They will get restless. They don't want to be fenced in, is their motto. So they're wanderers, pilgrims, seekers. Maybe they go on walks on 9 Mile Portage, I don't know. All kinds of, again, really strong Explorer brands. North Face is a good one. Levi's, particularly when it comes to jeans. Starbucks, believe it or not, started off more as as an Explorer brand, and it felt very earthy when you would, and still to this day would, when you'd go into Starbucks. And you can add to that Jeep and many more types of Explorer brands that would make sense. So I've really went through these fast, and I know 12 of them is a lot to digest in a very short period of time. So I apologize for that, and I was trying to keep under the time constraint. But underneath the hood here, there is a lot of really good information. You're probably asking yourself, what archetype am I? How do I find out what archetype am I? And sometimes you might not be who you think you are, or often what happens when we do work with people is we will get them to fill out a questionnaire. We do it online now, but I'll share a PDF with you. We get them to fill out a PDF, and often with groups that we're working with, we'll have as many people as we can fill it out. We'll obviously have the founders, but if they have employees, and if anything, even some of their customers, people who know them well, and we're trying to see if we can find a pattern. We use what's called our Larche archetype detector, and again, I'll show it to you a little closer in a minute, but basically it just prods you to answer 10 questions, and then we'll kind of output a score for you, and it will tell you what your primary archetype is. Now, when we do this with companies, what we sometimes find out, and I will tell you right now, it's probably more common than not common, is that they don't know what their archetype is. And when we get the results back, there's no consistency. They might have points all over, scattered all over in terms of the way they answered the questions. And what that often tells us is that they don't really understand or have a unified voice yet, or there's some confusion in there. So we will often ask them to go back at it and say, okay, revisit this. And because sometimes you could fit into 2 or 3 or 4 of them, you just have to pick one that's going to make the most sense for you from a competitive point of view. But I'm just going to, I took the name out here because when we're doing research for companies, this is one company that we did some stuff, and there's a bunch of math behind this, but you can see that, this company in particular, Sage and Hero got 40 votes and 37 votes, and then it kind of went down to what they didn't think they were. This is not bad because it shows that at least they have the potential to be one of these or both. And like I said, you can have a primary archetype and a secondary, but sometimes what we'll see when this comes back is the line is pretty straight. And that is a warning signal that you're probably not really being authentic in the way you're communicating, because you believe that you're just about everything here. And often that comes from companies or people wanting to make everybody happy. And as a result, you try to make sure that you think if my messaging is very mainstream and doesn't hurt or offend or stick out in any particular way, then I won't offend anybody. The problem is you don't get noticed that way. picking an archetype and living it and being consistent with it and saying everything I do is going to come from that archetype point of view is going to give you a consistent voice. And let me see how I'm doing on timing here. I'll just show you one more thing and then I'll open it up to questions. Hopefully I can, hopefully it's going to work here. I just got to switch screens. I hope everybody's doing okay. All right. Hopefully you should see a document there. I know that you probably can't read it, but this is what I'm going to make available. I'll make it available to Sarah and to Jenna, and you guys can get a copy of it. It's a PDF. It looks like it's 3 pages, but I'm going to just take you through it a little bit because this is something you can fill out yourself and you can have other people fill out as well. The only thing I ask you is this: we put this together, and it's. I would prefer if you didn't kind of just circulate it out to the world. You could use it for your own organization, but I'm just going to get the screen a little bigger here to take you through it and just give you a little explanation of how you fill it out. So there's going to be 10 questions, and the first question, for example, and you only pick one answer. This is going to be the tough part. The first question would be, our organization most highly values employees who are, and then you would have trustworthy, independent, intelligent, hardworking, catalyst for change, down to earth, lovable, fun. You go through these and you say, okay, which one would I pick? And then if you, let's say you wanted to say intelligent, you just click on intelligent. And then you go to the second question. Our organization prides itself on, and then again, I'm not going to go through all of these because we just don't have the time. But you might say not following the status quo on this one. Our product services make our customers feel, it makes them feel wild. Okay. Our organization helps customers, and again, you can go through this and say, express their outrageous side. So you would go through this, and there's like 2 pages of them. And once you've done all of this, there's a little coding behind here. And what this will do, and again, I just filled out a few of them, but I put in 3 of them fell into Outlaw, and 1 of them fell into Sage because I only filled out 4. But all the marks will fill up here. And what you want to look for is to hopefully have an archetype with a score of 6 or above. Because if you don't, if you have numbers like 1, 2, 3, then you don't really know what your archetype is. But if you have something with a 5 or a 6, 7, then you probably have a pretty good idea of what your archetype is. Once you figure out what your archetype is, there's like I said, there's some math behind this. If you see this one here, it said Outlaw. If I hit View Primary and I click on that, now if I go underneath here now, you will see a document. You'll see a document that talks about Outlaw and the Outlaw brand and how to be it, how to look it, how to feel it, how to sound like it. And in this particular case here too, I'll go back here. You have a secondary archetype. So you can click View Secondary and you can click on that, which is Sage. And now if you go underneath here, you'll have the Sage archetype. And again, it's a document. So you'll have this, and I'm telling you, if you have a 5 or a 6 or a 7, I would print this out and say, anytime I'm communicating, am I doing it from this this perspective, this kind of archetype? You can reset it. There's a reset button, and then you can do it again. If you pick a different archetype, new pages will show up. So I will make a copy of this available, like I said, to HBEC, and then they will, if you want a copy, then you can get it. If you, if you did want to learn more about this, I'm always open to, to a discussion. If you ever wanted to look at talking to our company about this, again, when we do it, we do an online version and we try to get as many people as possible. And there's some other things that we bring into it. And then we usually come back with a recommendation that, would involve a lot a lot of things, and not just, if you, whatever archetype you pick, what are the best channels to use? What are what social media and so on? What's your, everything from your color palette to your tone and your voice come into play. So with that, I'm going to, oh, wow, it's 10 to 11. Sorry. I'm going to stop, and I'll pass it back over to Sarah and Jenna.
Thanks, Paul. That was amazing. And for those that didn't see in the chat, we will share out that information in our follow-up email. And then just a reminder for anyone that wants to be connected, if you pop your social media into the chat, we will share that with others so that we can cross-follow each other and amplify our reach. So there are some questions that are in the chat, and for anyone else that wants to ask them, just pop them down in the chat. I'll open the mic to John Pickard. I know he has a question, and I'll let him take it away.
Morning, everyone. Hi, Paul.
Hey, John.
I saw you recently in that very setting, but you look different somehow.
Yeah, cleaned up.
Larche, in fact, helped us work on customer personas, and which is maybe sort of the other side of the coin.
The side of it, yeah. This is internal. Yeah.
Right. And I'm just wondering how they relate. So if you're, as an example, an Outlaw brand, and you have customer personas that maybe are, sort of more like creators or whatever, if you stretch that a little bit. I mean, can you appeal to anybody, or
No.
are you really zeroing in?
No, and that's this. If the first couple of slides I put up, and again, I know I started talking about Carl Jung and all of this stuff, but one of the first things I said in there is that you want your archetype to best represent what your target customer is,
Okay.
and who you are. So you have to do both, because you can't say, well, my target customer is this, but I'm not, so I'm going to pretend to be them, because you will get caught out. Like eventually you will get caught. They're going to see through you. And we see that all the time in brands that we deal with, or companies. We go, you know what, I have a feeling, I have a bad feeling about these people. There's something that's not jiving, even though they're maybe trying to talk my language. I don't believe them. And so you have to, that's why I said these things do take some work, and you might have to reconsider, like, again, as long as it's not coming from insincerity, there's 3 or 4 usually that you could probably be within that group and with who your target customer is. You just want to pick the one that's going to make the most sense for you. And the other thing that you want to bring into consideration is that if there's 2 of them that work well for you, look at what your competitor's doing. First of all, more often than not, your competitor will probably not be following this. But if they were, and they were a really strong, let's say, guy-gal brand, then you might want to say, okay, I'm going to go for the innocent position, because it's going to separate me from them, and it's still coming from a point of sincerity, and it's still coming from what would be what my target customer would be interested in.
Thanks.
You okay?
Thanks, Paul. I'll open it up to Carol from I Dream of Trees Photography. She has a question for you.
Hi, Paul. This is great information. Thank you so much. I'm a personal brand photographer, so this is right down in my alley.
Perfect.
Just a quick question. Is it possible for you to score, I guess, in primary and secondary right in the same section of the archetypes? So for instance, can you be a primary explorer and then a secondary sage?
You can, and when people look at that, they often think of it as a color wheel, and they think, okay, you have to find complementary ones. There's no, you can be within one area, or you can be within 2, because sometimes it could transcend more than one. But you do usually want to have one primary. You want to have kind of one primary, but if you have to, if for whatever sense your target customer base is a little wider than that, your secondary should make sure that it won't sound like, you don't want to be, for example, a rebel and a sage, because then you're saying I'm an expert, and then you're also saying that we're against the status quo. So you have to. There's some that wouldn't work well together, but a lot of them would. Regular guy, gal, innocent, caregiver would go along with many others. you know, hero brands fit into a few of them, sometimes as a secondary. When we did it for our agency, you know, we're a creative agency, so we were, you know, hoping that creative would come up to the top, and it did, and it is one of our two, but it wasn't the one that really kind of came through. For us, we wanted to be a sage because we wanted people, if they're going to spend money, we want them to feel that they're dealing with a company that really knows what they're doing and talking about. So in our communication, we try to make sure that we're positioning ourselves that way, and maybe even with a little bit of Jester in there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I see we're wrapping up to.
Yeah, I think, Paul, that's all for questions, but I don't know if you scrolled through the chat, but there's been lots of thank yous. So, and thank you from our team as well for joining us.
I turned it off because I didn't want to get distracted in case I saw,
Yeah.
Oh, this
Yeah.
is so boring.
Yeah, but thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And Paul, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, and like I'll get this document off to Sarah and Jenna in a minute, and you guys play around with it, and it should work fine. You need Adobe Reader, the most recent version of it. If for whatever reason it doesn't work for you, but you should be able to play around with it. And like again, you know, we just ask that you don't, you know, kind of post this on your social media things and say, hey, try this. This is just, you need a little bit of a background too. It wouldn't make sense for somebody just to get this and know what to do with it. So just keep it amongst yourselves, use it as a tool. And you know, if you have partners or in your business, or you have a few employees, you might want to get them to fill it out as well. And then compare, you know, the numbers, see how they fall out, and see if you're in the same ballpark. And if you are, you're laughing. You're halfway there.
Awesome. And yeah, if everyone wants to put their social media handles in the chat, I will share that in the email as well. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your Monday. The sun just peeked out where I am here, just north of Aurelia, so hopefully the same for you guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.